Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hello, all you awesome web design folk. This is Josh here. Welcome into episode, well, of course it's Josh. It's the Josh Hall Web Design Show. That was a weird way to start this one. Anywho, this is episode 170. Sorry, I just got done doing some tutorials, so I'm like, hey, it's Josh here. Anywho, episode 170. This one is about how to be an after-hours entrepreneur. And I think this is really important because a lot of you might be doing web design as a side hustle, so you are literally growing your business after normal work hours on nights and weekends in hopes to go full-time one day. So in order to really flesh this idea out and really dive deep into this topic, I wanted to bring on somebody who actually has a lot of experience in this. This is Mark Savant, who has a podcast called, are you ready for this? The After Hours Entrepreneur. So Mark actually had me recently on his show and we had a really great chat, and I invited him on to my show here to talk with you guys about this topic and how to practically, tactically, and maybe more importantly, strategically build your web design business after hours and how to do it without killing yourself, because this is really tricky. And I understand how hard this is. In fact, even when I built my brand here at joshhall.coop, I was essentially doing it after hours. I was doing it while I was building my web design business as well. So it was really exciting to hear Mark's take on this and how he's actually doing it and the tips that he's seen that has worked really well for his audience. So for those of you who are not yet full-time web designers, you're doing it after hours and you're doing it as a side hustle, this episode is going to empower you in so many ways. Even those of you who are full-time web designers, maybe you have a side hustle, or maybe you have a passion project that you want to do alongside your full-time work. I think this episode is really going to give you a lot of tips and actionable advice to help you do it successfully. So I'm really, really excited for you. Now, one thing I will say before we dive in, if you are going to do this successfully and not work 90 hours a week, you have to be so strategic about what work you're going to do that is going to get the biggest impact. And quite honestly, I don't know too many courses or trainings out there that are going to help you through this. It often is going to take a more one-on-one personal kind of touch to figure out your priorities and your strategy. So if that is you, I would love to personally help you prioritize and figure out what you need to do in order to take your side hustle full-time as quickly as possible. You have to be strategic, and I would love to personally help you with that. My coaching program is available now. It's my web design club. It's my coaching community. You can go to joshhall.co/coaching to find out more about that. And there's a special offer there for you. And that will allow you and I to have personal conversation, and you can join my coaching community. I can coach you directly. You'll also be supported by all sorts of other web designers, many of whom who are in your shoes now too. So you can chat with them to see about what's working for them and get surrounded by an amazing community to go from an after-hours entrepreneur to full-time web design. So join that today. Again, just go to joshhall.co/coaching with an offer to sign up for my coaching program. I would love to chat with you. I can't wait to meet you and help you prioritize your goals for doing this. And without further ado, here's Mark. We're going to load you up with a lot of ideas and practical advice for being an after-hours entrepreneur and getting ready to take your side hustle full-time. Mark, welcome onto the podcast, man. Great to have you on, dude.
Yo, Josh, what up? It's good to see you again.
It's funny because you're a podcaster. If people can't already tell by just hearing your voice and seeing your setup, but you were in host mode a little bit ago. We had to redo the intro because I told you I need you in guest mode now. You recently had me on your podcast. It was an awesome experience, which is the After Hours Entrepreneur podcast. So much fun. So I wanted to return the favor and have you on, particularly to talk about this idea of after hours entrepreneurship. I got a lot of folks who are listening to this who might be side hustling and are trying to build their business on the side after hours of wanting to go full time. So needless to say, super excited to flip the table here and have you on to talk about this. Before we dive in, man, do you want to let everybody know, first off, where you're based out of? And then if you could just share what you do, whether your website or whether the podcast, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So thanks for laying that up for me here, Josh. I live in sunny South Florida. in the US of A, I guess. And I love it down here. Been down here a long time. But one of the coolest things about the internet is I'm connected with everybody all over the place, which is super cool. What I do on my side is I make podcast production simple, right? I think that over the past 4 years, I've learned a ton, and I've just really focused on taking off as much of the production off of clients' plates as possible. And sometimes that manifests in doing consulting work to help a team or a business build out their own systems. Or in some cases, and in the majority of cases, it's just, I take all the podcast production off your plate. So all you do is show up and record. We do everything else.
Gotcha. Now, your podcast is quite a different brand, I guess, per se. I'd imagine your listenership might be a little bit different, although I know a lot of your ideal customers are podcasting. Where did the idea for the After Hours Entrepreneur podcast come from? Because I love the name. It's really clear what the name is. Where did that come from?
Well, it's funny. I find that coming up with a great name for a show is really, really tough. And I agonize, Josh. I agonized in my room for months, keyword research and trying to find a name. And I find a great name and then someone already had it, or I couldn't get the domain, and goes on and on and on. And for about 3 months, I was stuck in my room in my little lab trying to figure out the perfect name. And it just so happens that we were on a road trip. I was going with my wife on a road trip. We're going up to Central Florida, and I was just explaining what the show is about. And all of a sudden, After Hours Entrepreneur came out, and it was like, ding, that's it. That's it. But I do just want to kind of say, Josh, that you brought up an interesting point here that I found about entrepreneurship, and that it's not a straight line. It's not like super clear or obvious where your ship is headed right away. And over the years, my brand has evolved immensely, and it probably is still going to continue to evolve as I learn more about my audience, about myself, and about my client.
Well, that's interesting, because I was kind of curious, and I back you up. There's a reason my show was named after my name, because I was like, screw it. I'm just going to call it the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Done. Roll. Let's go. I had to get to that point because I had every other name in and around web design, did the same thing, did some keyword research. And I was like, I thought about the Web Design Business Show or whatever. I was like, screw it. We're going the personal brand route, since that's my website anyway. But the After Hours Entrepreneur name, I definitely think resonates with a lot of folks, especially who are in that position where they want to get to full-time. They are still not a full-time entrepreneur in your case. And I imagine that has probably opened up a lot of different types of entrepreneurs in different industries, right? I mean, are you serving like coaches, designers, product entrepreneurs? Do you get a lot of different types of entrepreneurs coming through that?
So the short answer is yes. I try to really hone in on entrepreneurs, business owners that I think are going to help me build my business, right? And not meaning by like, I just want to, because people start podcasts for different reasons. One of the reasons you might start a podcast is to get potential clients on the phone with you so you can bring them on as a guest, provide value, and maybe land them as a client. And so that wasn't really my goal, although it's kind of happened and manifested that way on occasion. My goal was to try to get answers, to get problems solved, because as you're growing as an entrepreneur, there's so many problems. There's all the systems within your business. There's lead gen, there's marketing, there's your business development, there's all the branding. Don't even get me started on taxes and contracts and all the legal stuff. There's just so much to learn. And the After Hours Entrepreneur really focuses on building a digital business, and so I think it's great if you're a restaurant owner, you want to build up your restaurant, whatnot. We cover some of that stuff too, right? If you want to launch a podcast or YouTube channel on the back end. But really what I try to do is focus on the people that have been there and done that and can help me and my audience take that step to the next level. And not just educate and learn these tactics, but actually look at ways that we can execute them in our day-to-day life.
Well, an important thing I want to note here too, for folks listening who are full-time and who are not a side hustler, web designer, or entrepreneur, I'm sure we're going to hit a lot of things that are equally as valuable and just as relatable and practical for full-time designer. Like, I often think when I hear about the term After Hours Entrepreneur, that still resonates with me, because I'm still learning about things in my business almost after hours. I don't generally work more than 35 hours a week or so, but there are some times where I might take a course and I spend some time in an evening or something and go through stuff. So I'm still doing stuff after hours. And I think a lot of other people are, whether that is in the context of outside of a full-time job, or you are or in a lot of cases, it's a passion business. A lot of people I know are full-time web designers, but they're doing something on the side as a passion. So I just wanted to make that clear right up front. Everything we're talking about is not just for somebody, I'm sure, as a corporate professional who wants to go full-time entrepreneurship. Have you found that as well, that you're getting people across the board who may not just be that, full-time 9-to-5 guy or gal who wants to start their entrepreneur journey?
I mean, 100%. If there's one thing I found about successful entrepreneurs, Josh, is that we're always innovating. You're always trying something new. How can I scale this? How can I reach more people? How can I get into Clubhouse and turn the nozzle there? How can I leverage TikTok? So while a lot of my episodes deal kind of more with the digital marketing side of things, because that's what I do. I do podcast production. So I really focus on how can we get our name out there, reach the right people, et cetera. The reality is, like, if you're not applying your after hours to learn and develop and innovate, I just don't know how you can be successful. The world is changing so quickly. It's like every day something new is happening, and I really think that that's what after hours entrepreneurship is about. It's about this commitment to, while they're watching Netflix, I'm learning, I'm cleaning up my legal contract, or I'm improving my onboarding process. It's really, I think that's what it's all about, is putting in that after hours effort.
Now, let's start this off with what might be a bit of a difficult question, because I'm curious about this. And I struggled with this when I was starting my business. Although I didn't have a full-time corporate job when I started my business, I had essentially odd jobs. I forget on our podcast, when I was on your show, Mark, if I told you that I was a cabinet maker and a musician. Right, and then I got into design and stuff. So I was kind of like doing a bunch of random stuff. So I didn't have the typical 9-to-5 and then did work in the evenings. I basically just worked all the time and did a bunch of random stuff. But the question is, how do you work after hours, or times that may not be the typical Monday through Friday, 9-to-5, but don't end up killing yourself early on and don't end up working 90 hours? Is it about setting boundaries and balance as to how much you invest in those after hours?
So, I mean, this is like you said, a really difficult question, because effort is so important. And really what I try to strive for in what I do with podcast production with my show is try to see, how can we avoid the pitfalls? How can we stop ourselves from wasting time, wasting a year trying out Facebook groups? How can we avoid going a route that's not going to bear fruit or turn the needle on our business? And
that's a good point.
For me, it's incredibly difficult, right? I run an insurance agency by day. I run a podcast production company by night. I'm married. I got 2 kids, 5 and 2. And it's extremely difficult. In fact, I went 3 years in a row, just super hard, Gary Vee style, push. And it actually, at the end of 2021, I had a health break where I said, look, I got to take a step back. I got to reassess things. And by doing that, it made me much more thoughtful about the systems that I have in place. It made me much more thoughtful about the people, the team that I build to help execute these plans. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be a challenge. But when I look at a business that's growing, when you're creating something from nothing, extremely difficult. Don't let anyone tell you it's not. It's so easy to get caught up in, these quote unquote entrepreneurs with Bang energy drinks on their bikini. That, entrepreneurship is tough and it's arduous. There's ups and downs. And where at least where I'm at, full disclosure, is been working on this business for about 3.5 years. And it's finally starting to move from that crawling to that walking phase. Which to me is really exciting. Once we get from crawling to walking, then we get the systems in place, then we cut out the day job, then we just start sprinting and running. And that's kind of the way that I see on after hours entrepreneurship going. Look for fruit, look for seeds, and then start to really lean into what works.
That's a great answer to the question, because it's kind of what I wanted to get out of that was, how do you prioritize? What do you prioritize? You said it's whatever's going to move the needle forward. And you're not going to waste a year on, or going to waste too much time on. And honestly, even I'm full-time doing this, I still have to have that same mentality being full-time, because I don't want to waste a whole day doing something. Every hour is extremely valuable. And similarly, I have 2 kids, I have 2 little girls. I don't want to miss them growing up during the days and miss things that even as a full-time entrepreneur working from home, you can miss. You can very easily fall into the trap of 24/7. A lot of people think like, oh, I'm going to leave the 9 to 5, but I often joke around to people who do want to leave the corporate world and say, you have to be careful. You don't want to go to the 24/7. So it's a great point. It's a great point. You have to have those priorities, probably those boundaries on what you can invest in, how much time you're going to give yourself for certain projects and stuff. I'm glad that you mentioned too, I meant to mention this early on, that you are an after hours entrepreneur right now. So you are a good example of this. And I think this is why it's really cool to have you on to talk about this, because you are living it. Tell us about what you're doing full time, because what's interesting about this is we started this call at 3 p.m. Eastern. We're on the same time zone. So you're obviously not in the office doing that work. Do you work from home doing that? What's your full-time schedule look like? Is it a little more flexible?
So yes and no, a little bit of both. So I run an insurance agency, got a great team, been there for about a decade. And full disclosure, my father is actually the agent. So that has really opened up different opportunities for me. I just want to say that I think that everybody has different opportunities, right? And acknowledging where you have opportunities and where to leverage them is really, really important. It's very easy to get caught up in looking at, oh, it was easy for them because they had money, or it's easy for that person because they worked at Disney and had connections, but think about the opportunities that you have. And I think that mentality will start to bear more fruit than it will kind of looking at what the other person has or doesn't have access to. But I do just want to kind of make a little point, because you brought something up about navigating day job plus after hours hustle plus all these other things. And this really strikes home with me. Last week, there was a bunch of issues at our insurance agency, a bunch of issues, and kind of like a perfect storm where multiple team members are out the same day. Things are
right during Thanksgiving, of course. We're recording this the week after Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Everyone's already stressed out. We're already behind. Everyone's trying to get stuff out the last minute. And my father, who is the agent, the owner of the agency, has said, hey, Mark, I know that typically you're building your podcast agency on Tuesdays. I need to bring you in to help out because we're short-staffed and all this stuff. And I said, okay, cool. That's what I do. We solve problems. We resolve. I think as a team lead, that's important. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. I'm going to be stressed out because I'm going to be behind here and then I'm going to be behind there. And then on top of that, my wife got upset at me because I wasn't going to be there with her, because she's used to this schedule and she's used to having her time away from the kids to go do things while I'm at home. And then as I leave for work in the morning to go to the office, my daughter says, why do you have to work? You're always work. And so this is, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we overcome as after hours entrepreneurs is this almost like need to please everybody. And that's what my goal is not only to help myself, but to help others move from being spread too thin and being pulled in so many directions and shifting into a place where you can just focus on that one thing. And that's kind of my goal with the show and my goal with the podcast production agency that I'm building out here at Mark's Font Media.
So in regards to your full-time, sounds like you're a bit of a both. You got a little bit of flexibility, but at the same time do you have like certain days that you work in an office somewhere and able to work from home? Is that kind of how that works and how you're able to do your agency and the podcast along with that?
Yeah, that's the way I've at least managed my schedule. Is I'm physically in office Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then I work remotely in the home lab here, this beautiful lab that you see here, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So Tuesdays and Thursdays are kind of like hybrid days, and then evenings, weekends, we get scrappy. We find time to get things done. But one of the questions I get a lot is, Mark, you're showing up in my feed every day. You're doing this, you're doing that. You've got multiple shows. Like, how are you doing everything? And the answer is pretty simple. It's surrounding yourself with great people and then empowering them to do something that they're good at and that they enjoy. And that's, I guess that in a nutshell comes down to leadership, leading others and empowering others. But that's kind of how I navigate the hats as best I can.
And you have a little team. Like you're hitting on something really important. I think a lot of people think they need to be full-time in something in order to start scaling. But if I were in a situation where I was 9 to 5, and luckily, like you mentioned, there's a lot of hybrid models now, especially after COVID. There's a lot of businesses that have these like either work from home folks, or whether it's like a hybrid approach, which opens the door to more entrepreneurship opportunities. But the cool thing is,
I just want to say before you get
good.
into that next point, I do want to say that's a huge opportunity. Not having to commute to the office, you just earned yourself an hour, 2 hours a day.
Great point. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to watch the next Netflix show, or are you going to start doing whatever it is? Which is not like it's a Netflix, but it does present the opportunity of like, okay, there's a little bit more time here. What am I going to do with this? And if you do have a side hustle, what a perfect time to do that. But like you mentioned, you got a team that's managing a lot of this for you. I know when my episode went live on your show, I know that you probably didn't personally create all the graphics and do all the post-production and distribution. Maybe you did some of it. I don't know, but you didn't do all of it, which is why
I don't anymore, but I did for years, hundreds of episodes. So thankfully I got out of that grind. Yeah.
Same here. I brought in a VA at episode 50, shout out Cam. And then I brought in my editor in episode 100 or just before 100. So, and my life has changed dramatically. And more importantly, I'm able to spend more time with that extra time I have to the business, to my family, but I'm also able to serve everyone listening better because now suddenly I'm not doing all the editing and doing the tech, but I'm actually creating more content and getting guests and stuff like that. So I just think it's a really important point to make. You don't have to, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this. You don't have to be full-time to start bringing on some help and delegating. Would you say that's even more important to be able to free yourself up when you are an after hours entrepreneur so that you're not doing everything in your business?
Well, the short answer is yes. Bringing on a team just completely changes your world. It is expensive though. So you need to figure out, does this fit my budget? Am I generating enough income from here? Do I need to subsidize via my main business? Do I need to cut stuff out? So that's important. I think generally speaking, the best ways to remove yourself from processes are to leverage various systems that are already out there. Calendly, for example, is a really easy way to book guests for your podcast. It automatically can set up a Zoom meeting where you can meet and record. Then it automatically sends reminders to your guests. So you can really, instead of hiring a VA, you can just use Calendly as your entire guest setup strategy, using programs like Zapier to automate different systems together. Me and my team use Monday to basically do all of our project management, which has automation, which we're just really diving into. That's one of the big goals for 2022 and scaling. But the short answer is, I think looking for ways to outsource all the different tasks that you do is really important. And like you said, identifying what are the tasks that I can really provide the most value, because your show, your business, your brand experience can be a lot better if you're focused on that rather than, do we have the Instagram story ready for tomorrow?
Right.
It's putting your priorities in line.
That's a great point. And I've talked a lot about scaling on the podcast and then my business course and some other free resources that I put out, from like scaling a full-time web design agency to 6 figures and beyond. But those same principles here, shocker, they work from a side hustle too. Like the idea of a task inventory and figuring out what the most important task is and what I should focus on and what I can either automate or delegate. That's it. Whether you do that at scale with a full-time agency or whether you're doing that as a side hustle, it's still the same. It's the principle that is the same. And I definitely, you're totally right, Mark, in saying that there's cost to it and you have to evaluate expenses and make sure it aligns with your budget and everything. But the reality is, if you are a side hustler and you do everything yourself, it's going to take a long time probably to get into a place where you can comfortably go full time. And it's never going to be totally comfortable going full time, but it's going to take a lot longer. So if you can delegate, automate as much as you can, that will help expedite the journey greatly. So I'm glad you made that point. That's a biggie.
100%. That's really what I focus on, is either giving businesses the tools to create these systems for their show, or if you say, Mark, I don't want to deal with the hassle, you just do it. And you can hire an agency like Mark's Font Media to handle the whole podcast production. So again, listen, in general, if you can hire a firm or an agency to handle your problem, it's probably going to give you the best result. It's going to get you there faster, but it's more expensive, Right. So depending on where you're at in your journey, that may or may not be something that's a great fit. But I think that working towards building these strong and found, the resources around you is really important. It's kind of funny. I know we want to keep moving with the topics here, but when I hear about people that say, if only I had $1 million, then I'd have a really great business. I feel like it would be the opposite, because when you're in your side hustle phase of your life, when you're building your infrastructure, you're trying to build a concrete support. You're trying to build the structural support to actually build a building on. You can't build a building without a foundation. And if you don't have the systems, the scalability, if you don't have the right people in place, it just keeps fizzling out. And that's something that I struggled with over the past few years.
Great point. Great point. And everything you do from the first day that you decide to do something, even if it's just on the side as a side hustle, those are the bricks that you're laying. That is the foundation. That is going to build that entrepreneurial business muscle that's going to help you through situations later on. That's so important, man. I'm glad you made that point, because I think a lot of people tend to want to rush or get past the first phase of a journey. But when I look back at where I've come, some of the most substantial, like biggest business lessons came from mistakes early on and came from the very first things that I did. Like those first couple of years were so informative and so crucial. So all that to say, enjoy it. Like enjoy the day-to-day progress. Progress is the name of the game in any business or entrepreneurship or weight loss, whatever it is. It's all about progress. So that is a biggie. Now that also though can lead to what is one of the most important and I think probably popular terms of today in entrepreneurship, especially web design, which is imposter syndrome. As a side hustler, you might be looking at people who are full-time and think, am I an imposter because I'm not full-time doing this? How do you combat that? And how can people who are side hustling combat imposter syndrome with what they're up to when they might have competition that's full-time?
Yeah. So imposter syndrome is definitely a real thing. I've suffered from it at times. And I think that everyone has. There's a few different ways that I attack it. So I just try to keep perspective that there's things that I know that are helpful to people. You know, I might not be, when it comes to podcast production, I might not be, the top shelf, but I know a lot more than a lot of people. So I try to find my space and being, I think, transparent in documenting the process, I think is really, really important, especially if you're producing a show like a podcast, for example. It can be really easy to leverage that as a way to position yourself as, I know this, I know that, I'm an expert in everything, which it does. That's important that it establishes your credibility and your know-how and your network.
I was just curious because it is tricky, I think, particularly for web designers who are side hustlers. Right. They are like, how do I compete or combat with people who are full-time? Like that really does lead to the imposter syndrome. So would it just be, like you said, focusing on your strengths, focusing on your zone of genius, that kind of thing? Is that what kind of helps people in a side hustle type of role get through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so to kind of finish where I was going here is that everyone has something to give. And if you really focus on documenting the journey, and to me, being transparent about the failures and the stuff that messed you up, people, I think, empathize with that. I just got off a call with Chris Nealon, who came on the show, and he built this business called Cult, right? And basically it's a marketing agency that doesn't focus on paid ads. It focuses on what are brands doing to create these cult-like followings, right? The types of people that'll wear a Coca-Cola t-shirt, right? Or that will, drink Gatorade because of the electric bolt that they remembered. What are these things that create these cult-like followings? Toms, you buy a pair of shoes, we give a pair of shoes away. These like really powerful things. So I think that when you're transparent, you're honest about the own challenges that you're going through, the more people get attracted to that. I feel like people get attracted to that authenticity. And it's that to me is what imposter syndrome is like. You're not positioning yourself in front of a Lamborghini when you drive a Honda Civic. You're being honest and saying, listen, just like I did here, I run a podcast production agency. I got a few clients. I'm moving from the crawling to the walking phase. And I'm hoping by this time next year, I'll be focused solely on this. Right. So
now, is there a time and place when it comes to, and I'm all about being authentic and being real and transparent, But at the same time, for a web designer in particular who might be side hustling, they may not want their clients to know about the full-time gig. Although if they're going to try to call you and get in touch with you, they're going to have to know. So this is a really great point in this conversation where it's like, how transparent are we? Do we move forward with that transparency like a level back? So like on my website, if I'm working full time, I'm not going to be like, I'm a landscaper by day, web designer by night. Cause I'm like, I want to make sure my business is going to be taken care of. Yeah. What I would probably do in that case is just be honest with the client moving forward that, these are my work hours. I'm currently transitioning here soon to full-time web design, but this is where I'm at now. And I have a lot of students in this position. It's actually a great point because I have a lot of students who are wondering like, how do I handle this? How transparent am I about this? What are your thoughts on that, Mark? Like how transparent do we get? Do we just have to measure like, is this going to hurt my business? Is it going to help it? What are your thoughts on that with how transparent we are if it's a side hustle?
Yeah. So the answer is transparent as possible without making yourself look dumb, I think. Because you're right. If a new client hires you, they're going to want to make sure that they're getting their full value, that you're paying full attention. So, we could go into detail on like your onboarding process, but when you're onboarding a new client, new customer, it is really important that you set expectations up front. What are we going to do? How are we going to get there? What is the goal of all this? And honestly, that has been probably the biggest lesson for me over the past couple of years or so is falling forward in every single client, making my onboarding better and more clear. Yeah. My first client was a train wreck. My second one was a bike wreck. The third, we're starting to actually drive safely. And over time, things get better. But there is one point that I think that I want to make here, Josh, when it comes to social media, when it comes to branding, when it comes to positioning what you do, you don't want there to be any confusion. This is a really common mistake that people will make when they're trying to build an after-hours hustle is you'll go to their Facebook page or LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I think, is a great example of this. It'll show that you're working at, Coca-Cola, but you also have this going. You also have that going. I would recommend what is your priority? What do you want people to know you for? And that's what you put out there. If you don't I don't really care if people know me as being in the insurance industry. You are not going to find anything related to insurance on my LinkedIn profile. It's all podcast production and media production. It's not because I don't do that on the sites, because this is what I want to be clear on exactly what I do and how I can provide value to others.
That's a great point because we can control a lot of that. Like, sure, if we are an employee with someone, there may be some place where they can find us online, but unless a client really tried to dig into that, it's unlikely, particularly if it's like a corporate type of thing where it's unlikely it's going to be online. But it's a great point because you do more now so than ever. You have the ability to control your online presence. So you can put out there what you want. And the really cool thing, even if you do work 9 to 5 or a hybrid, you can control the conversation. And it all comes back to what you just talked about, Mark, which was the onboarding sequence. That particularly if you are side hustling, you need to make it clear when you work or when you don't have to say when you work, but you can say like, if you have edits, send them over. We'll get back to you within 24 hours. They don't need to know that you send an email at 6 p.m. and not 9 or during work hours. Right. And if they need to set up a call, you can set up evening or weekend calls, rarely, ideally. But the cool thing about that is most business owners are busy during the day doing their business. So they often want to do calls in the evenings anyway. So there's actually a lot of potential here for side hustlers to control the narrative, control the options. I think it's a really good point because if you are going to side hustle, it kind of combats imposter syndrome because it's like, it doesn't freaking matter whether I work from 9 to 4 or whether I work from 4 to 8 for a little while. It doesn't matter. I'm still going to get the work done. So I hope that gives everyone confidence as a side hustler that you can still do just as much damage as somebody full-time in the allotted time whenever you work. It doesn't matter now. It does not matter when you work or where you work or what 100%. Time zone. Yeah.
One of the things that you've done, Josh, that I really admire is implementing videos and educational content, FAQs into your websites and stuff. That's another way of trying to alleviate those type of, this is actually, I'm going to kind of back it up a little bit. This is why I got started on YouTube in the first place. Okay. People kept asking me the same questions. They kept asking me the same question. I had a list of a bunch of FAQs and I just started recording videos, and it's evolved a lot since then. But, finding ways to, again, systemize, automate, find ways that you can replicate yourself. Maybe you have, like I have a podcast production manager now that helps with a lot of the client interactions. Sometimes I get involved, but that's a whole nother can of worms. But anyway, finding ways that you can support your clients without actually you physically being the one that does it's another way that you can create an expectation, deliver it, and try to keep that separation from you and your job.
Well, even more important for side hustlers, because you don't necessarily need to be on call 9 to 5 during work hours. If you do start to record all the questions that you get, you start to record those answers. There you go. You've killed so many birds with one stone. You just developed trust, likability, and authority. You've created some content which you could repurpose. You could put it on your website. You could promote it. You could, put stuff together in like a client resources type of page. You can do all these things while working on the side that will continue to basically be a little worker for you. That's how I view my YouTube videos or all podcasts. They're these little workers that I create once, and they can be continued to be listened to or watched over and over and over and over again. Some of my videos right now are some of my most popular videos were done like 3 years ago. So
right.
It works. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be an influencer or a YouTuber, but by golly, make videos of just answering questions. You're going to have to answer those questions anyway to clients. I think I told you this when we were chatting on your podcast. You might as well make it a video. And It doesn't need to be polished or super professional or anything. If clients are going to ask those questions, it makes you look awesome to say, yeah, I've got this resource here. And that really will help with this whole side hustle type of design, because it builds that authority and trust and credit. I just think it's really important, because it's a big question I see all the time. And again, it was a little bit different for me, because my side hustle was like right in the middle of all my other side hustles. So it was like one of four in the beginning. A little bit different than a typical corporate situation, but it doesn't matter. And I'm actually kind of curious, what are your thoughts on the landscape now of entrepreneurship as a whole? Like, are you super excited about the opportunities with both this hybrid model, with being able to have a side hustle, and are you excited about the landscape of technology and entrepreneurship now?
Okay. So I'm excited, but I'm nervous, excited. So anxious, I guess is the way to say it. So,
okay.
And Gary Vee has been talking about this for a while. The economic landscape has been really good the last decade or so. It's been a really great time, I think, to build a business. And I think that there's going to be more and more resources out there, and the cream are going to rise to the crop. If you're able to be super clear about what you do and who you serve, and you're helping people solve real problem, no doubt, opportunities are going to be great. What I'm personally nervous or concerned about, and I'm just, again, full transparency, right? That's why I'm here.
Let's do it.
One of the things that's almost holding me back from quitting the full-time job and going full-time into the side hustle is, what happens if we have a recession? What happens if we have a depression? What happens if all this money that's in the ecosystem gets completely inflated and is useless? So you look at history, every 10 years, there's something bad economically that happens. Every 80 years, there's something like disastrous that happens economically. So, while I'm extremely excited about the long tail of innovation, about technology, about the ability to communicate and scale that, very excited about that. Financially, I'm a little bit nervous. And I think that, if you're serious about moving your side hustle into a full-time source of income, I think you need to be thoughtful about, who you serve. What are the vulnerabilities? How can I reduce my expenses? How can I increase, the normal stuff, but I don't want to doom and gloom everyone, because I do think that at the same time, we're moving into this freelancer style of economy where I don't think people are going to be going to these big corporate headquarters in 10 years. People are going to be working from home.
Yeah, there's going to be a hybrid for quite a while. Now I'm going to put my coaching shoes on here, Mark, because this is a really good point. I appreciate you, first off, being transparent about that, because that's probably a feeling that most entrepreneurs share. I felt that. However, my tune has changed dramatically over the past probably 2 years, particularly through COVID, because I saw a lot of people who had one job, one source of income, and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt in college to get this job. And guess what happened? They were not in the must-haves kind of zone. Like, they were the expendables. There was a job that wasn't deemed necessary during a few months, sometimes a few weeks, sometimes longer. I actually think it's almost more risky now to have, which I know this isn't the case for you or a lot of other people's listening, but it's so much more risky in my mind to have only one source of income that you don't control. Like if you just get a job, that is a risky position because what if they do cancel? What if that, you're vulnerable. What if that recession does happen? So I actually think it's more important and more exciting than ever to be an entrepreneur or to at least have different sources of income that you can build up, turn up whenever it comes. And I know you're in a situation that may be a little bit different because it sounds like it's a family type business. So it's not like there's probably some intricacies there, I imagine, getting that role eventually, but that's my kind of, that's my thought towards that as a bit of a, well, hold on, because it is risky also on the other hand of just clinging to a full-time job and letting a potential side hustle go by that maybe you could make 3, 4, 5 times as much as a full-time employee in that job. So, good that's points. Why I understand it, but yeah.
And that's why it's important, I think, just to start trying different stuff, whether it's web design, podcasting, maybe you're selling t-shirts on Etsy, whatever you're trying to do, because what you're doing at that time is you're building up skills. Okay. And you brought up a really good point, Josh. And that's this idea that to be successful in the United States or in the world, you got to go to college, you got to get that degree, you got to get the great job, and then you can retire when you're 70. But we're seeing I think a very profound shift from this credential-based economy to a skills-based economy.
That's good.
To me, when I think about the future of entrepreneurship and this side hustle mentality, even if this podcast production agency doesn't turn into, a 6-7 figure business, even if it just ends up being a side hustle, I'm going to be developing skills to make myself incredibly relevant in this new marketplace. So if I lose this other position, I know that I've got the infrastructure, I've got the skills, I've got the network that I can make the next thing happen.
And there it is. A great point. And anyone doing a side hustle, just remember, it's never for nothing. It's never all for naught. Even if you end up disbanding with it eventually, you learn new skills. Most all web designers, entrepreneurs, and what you're learning is you're learning communication, you're learning team building, automation, delegation. You're learning basic business principles. You're all these things that we've already talked about so far. You are learning that. So no matter where you go from here, you've automatically got these new skill sets that I guarantee your full-time job is not teaching you. And that is the biggie. And I will say too, you mentioned the idea of going from a credential-based economy to skills-based. That's 100% true. Guess how many clients asked me if I had a college degree? Anyone
0.
watching or holding up a big 0? Nobody gave a shit. No one wanted to know if I went to Ohio State or whatever, which is the big thing where I'm from. They just want to know, can you help me grow my business? What do you know? That is awesome. And again, I've talked about this a lot. I tend to rail on it a little bit, but I am not against college completely. I'm against it for most things in business and marketing because I personally, from my experience and from what I've seen in people around me, college tends to just slow people down and be terrified of failure. And then they get so far in debt. Yeah. And there's this mentality of this idea of being afraid to fail as an entrepreneur is brutal. You have got to get over that stat. Like you are going to fail. I fail at stuff all the time. It really is experimenting and trying things. And I guess a question on that note for you, Mark, how has work for you as an entrepreneur differed from your work as a full-time employee? Like, do you feel more open to try things and fail? What does that look like for you?
Well, so definitely I'm more willing to try things and fail because, you're ultimately only responsible to yourself. You don't have to answer to a higher up or somebody else.
Yeah, that's good.
So I definitely think that I'm more willing to fail, but I just can't. I mean, this is such an understated point. And to me, it's one of the hardest parts about trying to build up your business is that every single day you're going to get punched in the gut and you're not really going to know how to handle it. There are definitely days, I don't know if you can empathize with this, where I get up, I can't even tell you how many windows I've got open. I probably got 50 windows open and I just look at the screen. I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do today. I know there's a lot that I need to do, but I don't even know what I'm going to do. And that I think is one of the hardest things to do as an entrepreneur, because as an employee, you already have the structure set up. You already know exactly what you have to do. because your boss tells you what to do, or you have a certain function. But as an entrepreneur, you're creating something from nothing. You are not only molding the clay, you're creating the clay with which to mold. And the skills that you learn from that, I think, make you really resilient to a lot of the challenges that we're going to be facing that are guaranteed to hit you in the face in the coming years.
That's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because when you do become an entrepreneur, that's exactly the case. You have all these things that need to be done, can be done. It's like, oh, what do I even focus on? What's funny, man, is I did not struggle with that too much as a web designer because I had deadlines and I had clients who were pushing me. So it was almost like they were my mini bosses for a time, within constraints and limitations. But when I went full-time, joshhall.co, it was an overwhelming, like I thought I was going to feel free as a bird and be excited about working on this piece of content. The exact opposite happened. And I was like, what's wrong with me? I can't enjoy this, because I was awesome. But I immediately felt overwhelmed with like, oh my gosh, I have so much I need to do and want to do. And now I don't even know where to start. And it was interesting. And I think this will help with this point. There's a reason I'm saying this. I had limitations, and I didn't even think about this. I should have said this early on. JoshHall.co was an after-hours entrepreneur venture before I went full-time with it and before I started scaling my agency. So I get this. I've lived this. What I realized is I got a lot done, and I felt almost better about launching this endeavor. The first couple of years it was about a year and a half part-time, it was a couple of years part-time, because I had limitations. Like I only had so many hours I could work on JoshHall.co because I had client work and I had other stuff. So I had to get done what I could get done in those hours. And it almost helped me prioritize tasks and do what I absolutely had to do. So I've had to kind of remind myself of that. I have to give myself deadlines, and I have to give myself priority type of lists on like, okay, here's everything I want to do. This is the list I need to do within this certain amount of time. This is the list I would like to do. This is the stuff that can wait a little farther out. Like that is key. If I can give you any advice on how to handle that, that was key for me. Deadlines and priority. It was really those two things, because that was the only thing that got me through that overwhelming feeling of like, I have so much to do. I don't even know where to start. I think everyone's been there, especially when you get really busy. But those are the keys: deadlines, priority. I hope that helps everyone, because whether it's a side hustle, whether it's a full-time job, those are key. When somebody is not pushing you and telling you what to get done, you have to tell yourself what to get done, which is tough, isn't it? Like I hated having a boss. So that's why I love being an entrepreneur. And then suddenly I realized, crap, now I have to be my own boss.
Right. It sounds easy until you're actually living it and doing it. But it's really fulfilling too, to see that I created this. And again, it's kind of funny as I continue down my journey, as I continue to interview after-hours entrepreneurs like yourself. It's just really inspiring to see all these common denominators and the things that all these great creators are doing and entrepreneurs are doing. But one thing I find that they all have in common, and just kind of segue, because I feel like I keep talking about this on every episode, is the community they build around themselves, or the community they join, whether that's a mastermind community, whether that's a membership community. We talked about, I think, SPI Pro, Pat Flynn's community the other day.
Yeah, I'm a part of that.
Yep. And that's something I think about a lot too, because you are the average of the people you spend the most time with. And if you're going to your main job and you're working with a bunch of employees that have a different mindset, not a bad mindset, but a different mindset, then you go home and you talk to your spouse who really has no idea what the heck you're talking about when you're talking about algorithms and stuff. Then you talk to your kids or your friends, they want to talk about football. It's like, who are the people that are actually going to help you kind of see the next move, see that next step? Because it's oftentimes it's not very obvious. It's kind of cool actually that we're talking at this time, right in the middle where I'm revamping my website. We talked about that a lot on our last episode, but revamping the website, revamping messaging, all the social media platforms. And I think that as you continue to grow, you learn more about yourself. You learn from experts like yourself. You start applying. You start just taking action now. And then, like you said, learning, mistake. And that's a really hard thing to kind of absorb. I'm kind of jumping around a lot here, but I just want to highlight something that I read couple of years ago, early in my journey, I was reading Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, which great book. It's all about outsourcing and freeing up your time. But there was a point he made in there about entrepreneurship, and that's that you need to get comfortable with discomfort. And he had some different examples of how you can get comfortable with discomfort. But one of the examples was every time you pull out your wallet to pay for something, ask for a discount. And I will tell you, it is very discomforting to ask for that discount the first time. But guess what? After you ask once, twice, 3 times, A, you start getting discounts, but B, it becomes easier and easier to implement that. So anyway, I kind of jumped around a lot there, but
something you hit on there, which is really important. Well, a lot of things they were really important, but when it comes to side hustling in particular, it is extremely lonely. And entrepreneurship is lonely anyway, but when you are side hustling thing, often it's extra lonely because your time is limited. So you may not have as much time to invest in certain groups or whatever. But I would say it's equally as important to make time during your after hours time to surround yourself with somebody in your industry, whether that is a free Facebook group or like I have a web design club. I was a little bit late for our call today because I was in my web design club doing a live coaching call, Q&A. Those type of places are key because it will be extra lonely as a side hustler. Like you said, you have a full-time job. They're not going to know, and they're not going to be in the same mindset as you unless they may have a similar side hustle too, in which case make friends with that person. That could be a key relationship. You have a shared similar ground, but most people in the corporate world are not going to share the entrepreneurial struggles that you will go through as a side hustler. So I can't back you up in that enough, Mark. That is absolutely 100% key. I would say do that immediately. Get into something, whether it's free or paid. Surround yourself with people who are like-minded because it will help you change your mindset. You will learn from them. You will grow from them. You will get confidence from them. You'll be empowered. That is key. So I love that you said that. I was going to mention it later on, but I love that you said it because it is really, really important. There's no reason to go it alone nowadays. Well, this will come out in 2022. There's no reason to go alone in 2022. I don't think you can. We talk about this all the time socially. This is the most interconnected we've ever been as human beings, but also sometimes feels like it's the most separated we've ever been as human beings. So, I mean, we'll just say that as I put together my priorities for 2022, being part of some sort of mentorship or mastermind community is definitely at the top of that list. Not that I'm not involved with any communities now, I certainly am, but being much more, thoughtful about being it is something that I think is going to help move me from this walking to this running phase of the business. Yeah. I forget if I talked about this on when you had me on your show, but I've learned and discovered that the biggest strides I've made in business and in life are when I have somebody beside me who's in a similar realm that, they're pushing me, I'm pushing them, below me that I can teach, and it fires me up, sharing experience, and it gives me life, helping people. And very importantly, somebody above me who is teaching me lessons that I don't know yet, or that I haven't had the mindset for yet. Recently, I joined a mastermind group, which one of my close colleagues put together. And suddenly I'm in with people who are like tripling, quadrupling the sales that I have. And suddenly I'm like, oh, wow. You never want to be the biggest fish in the pond. I think it's really true. I think it's really important to have people above you that are making you, push and showing you things that are expanding your mind, again, beside you and then below you as well. And I don't mean below, like as a person below, but I mean like they're just not, they might be in the beginning of their business and maybe you're a few years in, you have a lot to share with them. So I don't know. I just wanted to make that known because I think it's really important. Even as a side hustler, you can still get into those type of groups or forums. So I love that, man. Well, Mark, we're getting close on an hour here. I have one final question for you that I'm really curious about that we can take some time on, but where would you like people to go to connect with you? Do you want them to listen to the After Hours Entrepreneur podcast? You want them to go to your website? Of course, we'll have it all linked. Where would you like people to go after listening to this?
Yeah, so you can definitely go to marksavantmedia.com. A couple of weeks ago, I was chatting with this great web designer. His name's Josh Hall. And he said, Mark, what we're going to need to do is we need to create your landing page. And that's got to be the trunk of your website. That's the tree trunk of your website. And then off that, you're going to have branches to the various offerings. So my friends, by the time you're listening to this, I'll have executed this wise advice, you go to marksmontmedia.com to be involved with podcast production. Yeah, baby.
Awesome. Well, I'll link that. I'll link the episode I was on for the show notes. Yeah, we had some fun, and you actually did a visual. We did some screen sharing. You put me on the spot with basically a website review that I was not prepared for. But I think some of the not prepared questions are the best because they're real and they're not super thought out or planned out. So yeah, I'll definitely link that. It was really fun to take a look at your site and to give you some tips there. My last question for you, Mark. Sorry, you might hear my daughter going wild outside my door. The joys of being a stay-at-home entrepreneur dad. What is it going to take? I'm just going to be straight up transparent with you. I want to know, what is it going to take for you to go full time with Mark Savant Media? What would it take? We've already talked about the apprehensions of economic landscapes and stuff, but practically, do you want to, pass your income now with Savant Media to feel comfortable? You don't have to share exact numbers, but what would it take to go full time with that? 'Cause I think that'll be encouraging for anyone else who's, getting close to going full time.
A lot there. And, one of the things I want to point out is, being an entrepreneur dad myself, that comes with its own set of challenges. I look at these 20-year-olds who are building businesses by themselves. They don't have any kids. Maybe they've got a girlfriend. I'm like, that seems a lot more manageable, because now all of a sudden, because when you're supporting a family, not only do you have to provide for your own plate, you have to provide for 2 or 3 other plates at the same time, which is a unique situation I'm in. So, I'll what the heck, I'll lay out my 12-month plan. So
here we go.
My plan is by this time next year that I'll be only working on podcast production. I'll have a podcast production agency with a community of people that are looking to simplify their podcast production. Right. So a little bit of two things, which play off each other: community and a book of clients. So that's the plan. How do we get there? Well, my goal is to have by this time next year, 5 podcasts on autopilot. I'm fully producing these 5 shows on autopilot. I've got a couple right now. I've got some on and offers. I've got some maybes, but the goal here, and I think that's achievable. I think that's very achievable based on the systems, the team that I've got. So that's the goal. 5 clients on autopilot. And additionally, at this time next year, my wife will be going back to work. She's a teacher. Very important to her that she's teaching, which also means that I don't have to absorb as much of the household responsibilities I would, health insurance and these things. So my plan is to kind of lay it out like that, looking at my unique opportunities and whatnot. That's the goal.
This is great because there does need to be a strategic planning type of process in 100%. Place when you're getting ready to go full time, whether that's getting ready in like a week or a month or whether it's a year out. I think that's really, really important.
And communicating this with the people that rely on you too.
Yeah.
You can't just come home from work one day and say, "Hey babe, I decided to quit my job. I'm just going to go full time with this side hustle." She's going to look at you like you're crazy.
Right.
So laying out that kind of game plan up front, I think is important. In my case, I'm actually laying out the game plan with my boss too, the agency owner, because we're on a different level. Our relationship is like that. But the last thing I'll say this, the last thing that anyone wants is for you to make a life-changing decision, like quit your job without letting them know, so I think it's good to communicate, have a plan, communicate, and then you can execute. Now I've got a really clear vision. I just need 5 clients. I've already got, a couple and then another couple maybes. I just got to make sure that the systems are in place that I can support the 5, and then we're going to be good.
Yeah, it's a confidence booster too when you actually see it work. The worst thing you can do is go full time on something without like sales and just hoping it works. Having a proven track record and a client base is huge. Which luckily for web designers, a lot of folks here listening are doing that part-time and they're getting ready for that jump to full-time. One thing I noticed, and look, I went through it too, man. When I sold my agency and I went full-time with JoshHall.co, all the same thoughts of like, is this the right idea? Like, what if people stop buying my courses? What if I run out of content? What if? What I realized is, I'm trying to think of where to take this final thought here without getting into another hour podcast. But what I realized was, we looked at risk because I have family too. I've got 5 mouths to feed. I've got 2 little girls. I got a wife and I have 2 hungry golden retrievers. I had to make sure the numbers added up with that. But I also realized there was so much more potential and opportunity with this at scale that I could do. And I kind of felt like too, personally, and I don't know if this comes into play with you, is like, I felt like this was my passion. I was not burned out from doing websites, but I missed doing joshhall.co stuff when I was building websites for clients. I was like, gosh, I want to do that. I want to teach people. This was my passion. I want to do a YouTube video. I want to start a podcast. I wanted to do all these things. Making the decision to go full-time to be able to do it. If I can just give you any, confidence and encouragement, inspiration, it was the most rewarding thing. Despite the feeling of overwhelm and despite the feeling of this, I had a proven track record that I could do this. My sales increased and increased. I got savvier with delegation and automation and everything we've talked about so far. And once I put it into play, then everything just opened up to a whole new set of horizons. So hopefully that's some encouragement, because sometimes the comforting thing of having a full-time job or a salary is often what's holding you back. And let's be honest, very rarely are you going to have a salary and a job that you won't be able to double or triple with a good entrepreneurial year. I had Pat Flynn on the podcast here in episode 100. And one thing he told me, which was fascinating, was he was making like 20 or 25 grand a month selling this little course that he put together, this little ebook. But he was still clinging on to a corporate job that was paying $60,000 a year. So like that, but it's often as easy as looking at that, like, holy crap, what am I like? Right. Can I make triple, quadruple, 10 times as much with this entrepreneurial endeavor if I'm not spending 9 to 5 at this corporate job? Very likely you can. So I'll end it there, but I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that's a mindset shift that a lot of side hustlers need to take on and deal with. And yes, there's risk. Yes, it's really important depending on the family situation to have a plan and a strategy, but man, the time is now. Like, it is awesome. Entrepreneurship, the landscape right now, I'm just so excited about it. So hopefully this was encouraging, and hopefully this encourages you too, Mark. I hope you're, you, as much as advice you gave during this, I hopefully you take away some stuff from this as well, because I really enjoyed kind of digging into the ins and outs of after hour entrepreneurship, man.
Yeah. Well, it's just been an honor to chat with you here. And I'd love to hear from the audience too. And listen, if you've got any thoughts on the conversation about after hours entrepreneurship, maybe you share some of the same fears that I do, hit me up, contact@marksavantmedia.com. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you.
Beautiful. And I'll make sure I mention the link in the intro here so people can leave a comment. So you can tell you're a podcast host, man. I love it. You can always tell when somebody goes into host mode. So Mark, dude, thanks for coming on. Thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing your experience and your transparency through this talk. And I'm really looking forward to keeping track of how the next year goes for you, man.
Yeah, we're going to talk soon, Josh. I'm very much into the Josh Hall Co.
Sweet. Let's do it. Cheers, man.
Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.